like some small, slow intensity nerf here, and the stun duration on his Q will be a little bit lower. He'd probably be about the same because not anyone really knows how to play him that well yet. Corki basic attack ratio is down. This is actually pretty huge because he had a high damage conversion ratio for a champion with so much damage already in their kit. Should also make Blade of the Rune King better than Bloodthirster on mid Corki at least. This Aurelia change is a bit confusing. The mana cost change I like. I think it's alright that they would change her mana costs to not overbuff her, but then they changed the attack damage ratio to 1.2 from 1.0, which is pretty dumb. I don't think that's a good idea, but we'll see if it actually means anything. She probably just won't be seen for a while, and then like out of nowhere this buff will mean something when the meta shifts. This is a pretty expected gen nerf. They're hitting the mana costs on his Q the most, and the damage is going to go down slightly. The ratio isn't changing though, so that's good. And then E is going to be slightly more usable now. They mentioned that his play patterns were basically not conducive to using E at all. Like, you just use all your mana on Q for the landing phase. So that should change things a little bit. He's going to be about the same though. Really losing 10 damage on his Q is not that much. And if you use biscuits, then you don't have mana problems already anyway in lane. Kindred's ultimate is now self-cast. This brings down Kindred's utility quite a bit actually. Now when you're fighting in team fights, it's not going to be centered around who is going to die and then get a really good Kindred ult off on maybe even your whole team. But it's going to be more focused on fighting in that AoE. And then if you're not near Kindred when he's using his ult on himself, then you're pretty much boned. So it doesn't mean that he can't flash in and use his ult to save a teammate or like Q in or whatever gap closer he wants to use to get over there. But it makes it a lot less easier to cast for experienced Kindred players. Maybe it makes it a little bit easier to cast for new Kindreds, but if you're used to playing with old Kindred, then this is going to be quite a big change. You probably won't get saved as often. And the W nerf here is just to the heal. That's going to make it so Kindred has to go back to base a little bit more often, I think. Not anything too crazy outside of that, because the heal actually is higher at later levels. So it's like a slight late game buff for like almost like a little bit less early game. It'll probably be the most noticeable when you're invading. That Lysandra change is pretty much nothing. This Lux change is that her W now returns slightly faster. Like, she wasn't getting good use out of her shield in 1v1s. So that change is addressing that. Nidalee's jungle clear was still too good last patch, so they're taking a little bit of her damage early. Which is only 5 damage, it's not really going to do that much. Except when you count how many times it hits all those camps, it actually adds up to quite a bit. And they're adding 10 damage at the later ranks of W to compensate. Which I don't really think they needed to do that, but that's fine. Consistency, I guess. This is Poppy getting gutted, basically. Alright, so her passive doesn't reset autos now. Q damage is down, but the max percent HP damage is up by 1%, so It's still less damage for champions around 2000 HP. It'll be slightly similar damage. It's not going to be more, but it'll be similar damage for champions with higher HP as compared to her old base values and the 6%. I think basically this just means that like Poppy won't get so much damage onto squishies, and she'll still be hitting for the exact same amount of damage against tanks. So it just nerfs her damage against squishy targets by like 5 or 10, depending on like what point in the game it is. That's just on her Q. But then her heroic charge range got lowered by 100. That actually hurts the champion more than any of the other changes that they made. They lowered the range on her passive as well, the ranged portion. So I don't really think that her passive and E needed to be the same range. I think they could have left the range a little bit longer on heroic charge. If anything, this will be the change that gets reverted if Poppy's all of a sudden not played. Rammus, his ultimate cooldown is going up. 60-second cooldown at all ranks was pretty retarded. Especially for a champion that's so tanky. For him to have access to that reliable damage, it basically meant lane Rammus was pretty hard to deal with, especially since he has more gold and cooldown reduction. Jungle Rammus is pretty much unchanged by this, but it'll hurt a little bit. Soraka mainly got mana cost nerfs. Yeah, so I would expect to run a little bit more mana regen on her. I'm not sure if you're going to need to use runes or if it's enough to switch your masteries around. Or if you did that before, maybe you won't notice a difference. Hooter's base health regen from 8.7 down to 6. This is going to hurt the most. Because like a lot of what Udyr would do is use the sustain from Turtle Stance and the quick clearing from Phoenix to sustain the jungle for long periods of time, and while he can go Hunter's Potion and refillable, so this is going to hurt his ability to stay in the jungle for long periods of time safely. So especially counter jungling, this will hurt his counter jungling a little bit. The damage is down on Phoenix Stance, so that'll hurt his jungling a little bit, obviously. More importantly is the damage per second is down by 5 at every rank. So his jungling will be considerably slower, but still probably really good. The second round of damage nerfs on his Phoenix Stance, they're pretty justified. He's been like consistently performing even after the last nerfs, and not nerfs to Dead Man's Plate and Swifty Boots. He's still up there. So I think this will be good to get him back down in line with other champions. And Zed has also been running amok lately. His shadow cooldown is going up by quite a bit. It's going to be 22 seconds at rank 1. Then it'll be the same cooldown at max rank. But it goes by 2-second increments now instead of 1. So you'll still probably have to put points in W. But it might be better. It might be more damage and you're all in if you split points into E after you max Q. I'm not actually sure what the damage comes out to in game, but that would be something to consider. See what else did they change. Maw of Malmortius lost the attack speed portion on the passive, so now when the life steal triggers, you're not going to get the attack speed, and magic resist was lowered as well. For it to have armor penetration, magic resist, and attack damage, it had probably too much magic resist on it, so that's pretty good. Warlord's Bloodlust was changed. So range champions get half the benefit that they did before, so it's down to 25%. I didn't like this very much on AD carry anyway. For battle is really good. You can feel the difference if you're Warlord's Bloodlust AD carry versus a Fervor of Battle AD carry, and they've got similar items. You can just feel you're so much weaker. But if you get lucky enough with the crits, then you automatically win because you have Warlord's Bloodlust. But really just depends on the items and stuff. Death timers are going to be lower between 30 and 55 minutes. For some reason in this they're calling it mid game. I would consider that mid to late game, but whatever. It's Riot. Don't expect them to be good with terminology. Some vision changes that may or may not bite them in the ass. Rotating game mode queue and pre-made limiter. This just means you can't queue with people outside of two divisions, is it? Yeah. 2 divisions once you hit Diamond 5. So that's gonna stop really poor match made games in low to mid diamond, which I'm happy about because that's predominantly the tier that I play in until I get to master, of course. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the patch notes.